it would have been a Nobel Prize winner. That was loaded with stimulating jokes. There you go. I bet we're going to have lots of questions on the economics of housing. But of course, we're not just all dollars and cents and incomes. We live in places that have design. We live in places that have shape and physical presence. And that's what our next guest is going to talk about a little bit. Barry Johns. Most of you won't know Barry personally, but I am certain that you know his work. This includes MacEwan University's original downtown campus, the one, with the two great towers. When I was in the legislature, I would come out of the legislature building, and I always had this sense as I was going down those front steps that at the other end of 108th Street, positioned exactly in line with the legislature, was the main clock and towers and entrance of MacEwan University. And the symbolism of that, of the connection between knowledge, education, and democracy, was never lost on me. That's the kind of subtlety and attention to context that Barry Johns brings to his design. Other buildings around the city, One River Park on Saskatchewan Drive, perhaps the most elegant condominium tower in the city, various projects at the University of Alberta, and many others. Barry is the recipient of the Governor-General's Award for Architecture. He has run his practice in Edmonton for 45 years and recently completed his doctorate at the University of Calgary studying the housing crisis. His new book is titled Effective Urban Densification, and it surveys his research into the housing crisis, and he will be speaking about that today with, I think, some very specific examples of design ideas for infill in Edmonton. So please welcome Barry Johns. You're welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. I get 20 minutes to share 6 years of my life with you, and I have to take the first 5 to redesign the podium. I'll tell you, it's not easy to follow a pair of giants. I think this was a setup. I hope it won't take 5 minutes. Okay, all right, let's do this. It's such a pleasure to be here. Dave certainly did an awesome job, I think, dealing with all of the issues that face our cities relative to housing economics and what I call the housing question. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm going to spend a little more time from an architectural perspective and share with you some thoughts about infill, densification, and above all, affordability. And I hope I can unpack through this discourse a few thoughts about our bylaws, where and how our city is dealing with them, and hopefully try to introduce a new idea to you, one architect's idea, about how we might think about our communities in the future, given the reality of densification as we know it. So the first thing that I think Dave very nicely explained is just how bloody complicated the housing question is. It is a collage of so many different impacts, inputs, influences that frankly go well beyond the issues of municipal governance and bylaw reform. There's so much more to it than that. So I'll start with this abstract diagram. On the left, basically, is the planned reconstruction of our communities relative to the new bylaw that was put into place in January of 2024. And on the right is what I really want to be talking to you about, which is an idea about backfill. That's an acronym that stands for Back Alley Advantage, Kinship, family, and integrated living. And it is an attempt to try and address issues around preservation of existing housing stock, finding affordability in a development model, and providing, I'll say, respect for community that is sorely lacking in the bylaw that we are currently living with. So I'm going to try and illustrate how all of this is possible. But first, let me try and set the table for you before introducing this new idea. So I think it's important to remember that infill, when it first started in earnest in the city, goes back to about 2009, and it began with what we call the McMansion movement in our neighborhoods, where properties were developed with enormous new product. But ultimately, we called that infill, but the purpose of infill was to fill in the gaps in mature neighborhoods on empty sites or on derelict properties to help revitalize a community and to enable it to respond to the needs of a growing population and a variety of different cultural groups and demographics that would be coming to the city. So this slide, after that introduction, is really to explain that infill has had a very dramatic effect in the last year especially of atomizing our communities. It never was intended to be that way, but I'll go back to when I first started my research in 2019, just before COVID hit. And in 2020, I discovered in Allendale, not far from where my accountant's office is located, this property that I've driven past many, many times now. In 4 years, between 2020 and 2024, that lovely little ranch house to the left of those two large infill units ended up being torn down, the lot vacated, and an even larger infill property built next to it. And to this day, that piece of property is awaiting another investor who ultimately will put in another infill, likely the same that you see here, with third floor roof decks and all kinds of impacts on the neighborhood. So this is not even over the length of a community block. It's basically 3 single-family lots, and this is what has happened as a result of the bylaw. So as the slide says, the first thing that happens with infill nowadays is demolition. We tear down perfectly good housing stock. I'll never figure out why. The second thing that happens is that we create atomization in our communities because we end up with new projects that are frankly disrespectful of the neighborhood. They don't take into account the scale of the existing or the style of the existing neighborhood context. And so with that, you end up with erosion of family history, of community networking, what I call social sustainability. Everyone's interested in environmental sustainability, but no one talks about social sustainability. So infill may be a model to increase densification, but it's not about community. So here's where we are today, a heritage home in Highlands, where privacy in a backyard is impacted. We've got issues related to traffic, parking, and refuse, which I think is going to be, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And to give you kind of the poster child example, here we are in Parkview, right next door to Crestwood, and this is a street in Crestwood which epitomizes to me the beauty of the mature neighborhoods in the city of Edmonton, with our tree canopies, everything from from elm to oak, elk. I'll have to use that again. And a really lovely eclectic mix of housing stock, from single-family bungalows to 2-story, 1.5 stories, and a really kind of wonderful variety. But take a look at that innocuous for sale sign on the right, because this is what has happened. And what has taken place here is don't blame the developer, because they're simply following the rules. The bylaws entitle the developer to do this, and the land cost is so high that in order to get their money out, they basically have to build to the maximum allowable under the bylaw, and therefore you end up in a situation like this. To me, this is an affront to any neighborhood, and I don't know, my son happens to know the owner of this house, so I have a little bit of history around the background on the project, but that's neither here nor there. But I think at the end of the day, this is totally disrespectful and an unintended consequence of the idea of infill as a means to revitalize a community. So I want to kind of very quickly go back to Dave. My research has taken me into land economics, into lawyers' offices, into planning departments, much more than what an architect would normally do. And I'll try and summarize this goofy image by simply saying the biggest barrier to affordability in residential neighborhoods today is land cost. And nobody has figured it out. CMHC hasn't figured it out. Nobody admits it's an issue. But you can take a single-family dwelling on a 50-foot lot, tear the house down, subdivide the property, and each of those 25-foot lots is now the same cost, the same value as the original price of the 50-foot lot with the house on it. So it's doubling in value. So the existing house basically is seen as worthless because if it's torn down, all of a sudden the land value goes up, and that's what the game has become. So increasing supply has a counterintuitive impact in mature neighborhoods. You could probably live with the argument on the outskirts of the city where you have underdeveloped or new neighborhoods, and we're seeing density in new neighborhoods, but there's no community there. It's being built from the ground up. Here, it's a completely different story. So one of the things that I challenged myself to think about was, what if the land cost was zero? I mean, let's go for it. I mean, don't be silly about trying to find ways to save money to make housing more affordable by using Formica countertops instead of quartz. That's just piecemeal. If you want to save money and make housing more affordable, you have to go after the big dollars that are there, and land cost is one of them. So is there a way of removing land costs from the equation? So that became a challenge for me. And secondly, and most importantly, why must we start by tearing down existing serviceable housing stock? How ironic is it when you tear down a perfectly good existing house and add 2 units of infill? What are you gaining? You're not gaining anything. You've lost one house and you put 2 back, so you've basically gained 1 house. So the formula itself, I think, has some issues associated with it. So without going into the minutia around the business model, because it's very detailed, I have found a way to remove land cost from the equation. And it starts with retention of existing housing. So you don't tear the house down. And this may sound strange, but the landowner who has spent a good part of his life paying off his housing debt, who loves his neighborhood, and who doesn't want to move, and who wants to age in community, can actually become a partner with the developer and put up the land that he already owns for development in the back of his property. So the developer can build without buying or financing the purchase of land, and the owner gets to monetize his property and share in the proceeds if the new development is either rented or sold. So you can ask questions about that later, but this is an example of how it's possible for a developer to build without having to own a piece of land, and how it's possible for a landowner literally to have his cake and eat it too. To keep your property, keep your house, and still develop and turn this into an opportunity where children that couldn't afford to move back into the neighborhood where they were originally raised can now do so because they could move into a new unit on their parents' property, or vice versa. Maybe it's a child who's done well, who is living in a mature neighborhood like this and has an aging parent and wants their aging parent to live closer to them. That kind of intergenerational model is a thing in Canada right now, and there is nobody out there that is providing the supply side for that to take place. So we'll get into how it's possible to save money on land, but this is just a diagram on the left that illustrates the landowner as a partner in the process and the developer as a partner in the process. The two of them come together temporarily, simply for the purposes of developing a project, and then they form a development company. That development company can dissolve over time, or it can continue and move on to other projects. So this is of great interest to the development community. Why? Because they reduce their risk. And it's a terrific addition and possibility for landowners. Why? Because they have tenure in their property. They have some say in how it's developed, and they can stay connected with their neighborhood and with their social sustainability network and maintain it over time. I think that, so all these things begin to fold together. The one thing that's, I call this program 25 and 25 and 25 because we're talking about densification after all. We need to accommodate a population increase, but we don't need to do it overnight. And that, I think, is what's beginning to happen as we're doing all of this overnight. So, and this idea is not for everybody. So I call it 25 and 25 and 25 because if only 25% of the available single-family lots in a given neighborhood were to what I call commit backfill, and as a result deal with the idea of respectful densification, where you're not negating the value of a streetscape in a neighborhood, if that played out over a period of 25 years rather than overnight, if you took all of the mature neighborhoods in the city of Edmonton, and the city declares there's 84, I count 105, over 25 years, that would result in a population increase of 250,000 people. Think about that. And if you deployed that across the country, it would translate to millions in population increase, and neighborhoods would not have to be dramatically impacted. So that is what 25% of development on an aerial photograph of a block, in this case in Dovercourt, looks like. It's even hard to imagine that that's 25%. So there's something here, and I knew I was capturing, getting into an idea that was that could get legs. So I actually, as part of my research, developed a couple of demonstration projects, and this is one of them. So what you're looking at are computer drawings and drone footage sandwiched together. And the idea is that you develop the backside of available property, and you leave the existing house on the left, and you develop on the right. And what happens is that if you are sensitive enough and careful enough, and you don't overbuild on the property, you actually have the ability to retain the existing streetscape with no change at all. In fact, in this particular development, you can't see the new work from the street. So the character of the neighborhood is not changed whatsoever. What changes is the characteristics of the back alley. And this is why backfill starts with the idea of back alley advantage. Here is another aerial photograph that shows actually I have a pointer. One unit, another unit, another unit, and the existing house. This is a backyard, this is a backyard. These units are no larger, their footprint is no larger than a two-car garage. So when I meet with community groups and tell them that we're not building anything larger than a two-car garage, you can see their shoulders just do this, that the weight has been removed because they understand the scale of a two-car garage, just about everybody has one, and it's not threatening to the neighborhood. So, and this shows basically that footprint. There's a two-car garage, there's one of the footprints of the 3 units, parking in the back. And in this case, because it's a pie lot, there's this idea of tying all of the units together with basically a communal trellis. So working with simple materials, and being sensitive to landscape and the existing open space on properties it's actually possible to make places in a very, very modest way, and in effect gentrify the alley, the back alley. This is the back alley of this complex. It's very reasonable and very readable. The other thing about that is that you can also foster community interaction, maintain your social network with everybody, in this case, a block party under the trellis as an example. But more importantly, we give life to the back alleys of our city. And there's a couple of interest groups in the city that are dealing with green alleys. And this is very, very much the same idea taken to another level, with sidewalks, addressing, the ability to play ball, hockey, soccer, and have kids play without actually endangering life on the street in front. So the back alley can become a public amenity in many ways. And in one unit, let's say the lower part of this unit could actually be a little coffee clutch or a home hair salon. You find these things under the existing bylaws, they are allowed, but to incorporate them within a kind of network like this, you can only imagine the kind of activity and the joy that could come from not upending a neighborhood, but by adding to it in a way that respects the context and which addresses everybody's interest. So it is an expandable program. This is a corner lot with a single unit. This is the same corner lot with 2 units, and this is where 2 neighbors get together and develop basically a fourplex between their properties. So the ability to expand and contract, to create community, and to enable another way of looking at living, especially through this notion of intergenerational and, frankly, multicultural living, all of these models can fit within this strategy. This is actually a real project that started as a demonstration project, but we're going to build it. I'm doing this with a nonprofit developer in the Spruce Avenue neighborhood. And here it's 2 units and an existing house on a corner lot. And what ties these things together is a kind of extended trellis that terminates over a new veranda for the existing house. So everything looks like it's a unified composition, but unlike what I just showed you before, this is completely different. And one of the problems with subdivision planning and with the way in which infill is being done typically is everything is so commoditized and everything is so predictable that you're not adding any eclecticism, you're not adding any joy, you're not adding any uniqueness to a neighborhood. You're actually contributing to that commoditization. And that's one of the reasons why many communities are up in arms against the nature of infill that's taking place. So I'm having dinner with my wife in December, and she said, I think it's time to put your money where your mouth is. So I went out and bought a property, and it's just down the street from the demonstration project on the pilot that I showed you. So we're in for a development permit right now. I'm working with a custom house builder as a proof of concept, and I want to talk to you about what is happening here. So this is a typical Dover Court 1954 bungalow, and it's on a gorgeous property, which you'll see in a moment. It has very mature trees, including a small orchard in the back, and hedges in the front. And what I've tried to do is take the principles of backfill and trying to, in a way, create some joy in this notion of gentle densification. So I have the ability within this model to take and clean up and do minor renovations to the existing house and add 2 more units in the back and have them focused around a central courtyard, which can become a communal space within the site. So this is a drone footage, a little jerky, it was a windy day, that shows our property, which is this guy, and slowly emerging on the right-hand side of the screen is what is becoming typical in the city of Edmonton and what is allowed under the bylaw. What this is a 10-unit row house infill. So it's 8 units, 4 units with 4 suites down below, and then a 4-car garage with 2 more units on top, so 10 units. So the very scale of the garage and these 2 units makes the property that we have, it dwarfs it basically. So I'm actually quite excited about the fact that this is happening. I'm not excited about it happening, but I'm excited that it is happening because I get to compare. And the public will be able to compare one with the other and make their own determination as to what might be appropriate and what might be less so. This is the property, single-family dwelling with a garage, 50-foot lot before this construction took place. This is the new construction from the street, and this is our property from the street. So when you look at it in terms of the overall neighborhood, it's your typical suburban neighborhood. There's a motorhome next door, there's a large garden next door to that, and we have the advantage of 2 enormous spruce trees, a small orchard, and a Scots pine and a natural courtyard between a garage that is going to be replaced with a new unit because it's falling apart, and the existing house which is going to be retained. I spent all summer with an arborist making sure that all of these trees are healthy. And if anybody wants some cherries from our orchard, please write, don't just come to the property.
So how big is that infill that you're proposing for the back there? I mean,
This one,
500 square feet, 1,000 square feet?
It's a good question, and thank you. This one is going to be just over 1,000 square feet. This is just under 900 square feet. This house is 950 square feet. This is played out, I'll show you this in a minute, over a couple of different levels with no basement. So a very, very compact footprint.
And parking?
Yes. So these are floor plans which show the potential of over 3 levels for the larger unit. The upper level is basically a dormer-type attic space with dormer windows and a really intimate low ceiling. So the scale of the building is only a couple of feet higher than the peak of the roof of the single-family bungalow. And this one has a roof garden and is only played out over 2 levels. So they're very small. I won't get into the detail of it, but we can come back to it if there are questions about it.
Why would you not put a basement in those?
We don't need basements anymore. Let's talk about that later. I've done a lot of research that shows me that given the choice between livable space and basement space, as long as you provide things like storage and laundry and the essentials of living, basements, generally speaking, tend to be storage rooms. And it makes little sense nowadays with the cost of construction to spend a lot of money for unfinished rooms like that. And it does add up quite a bit. So here's a photograph of taken from the property of the new development beside us. And this is the courtyard. This is the Scots pine tree. So this is going to be one area where this garage will be removed, and that will open up the entire backyard. I face 2 lanes. So I have an opportunity now to take advantage of access to the site on 3 sides. So in a sense, it's like a corner lot. So these little vignettes show the possibilities of the courtyard being used as a summer block party, as basically a local barbecue area, skating rink in the wintertime, and of course, there we go, parking at the same time. And that's what the 2 units are going to look like. We're using warm metal, wood, and fiberglass windows, triple glazed. Our agenda, energy-wise, is net zero. It'll be net zero ready, if not net zero when it's completed. So I'm going to go quickly because I'm almost at the end. The whole idea is that backfill has, within its context, a business model that incorporates a design toolkit that gives recommendations to other designers, because I'm hoping that people will use this, to enable a number of different footprint designs to occur within 2 sets of rules. The idea of a pinwheel plan enables the footprint to be torqued on its central axis. So the building can be oriented to the sun and the wind, and it's not reliant on the property being north-south or east-west. It can be a variety of things. And there is this idea of an infrastructure core, where all of these spaces are basically left open, and the infrastructure core is basically a series of stacked components, from stairs to washrooms, kitchens, all of the piping, whatnot. This will be a house without ductwork. All of the air will be handled through a series of vertical shafts and delivered into the rooms through a series of bulkheads. So that also contributes to economy in the sense that the cost per square foot is much predicated on a much more efficient model. And then this is just the idea of the infrastructure core showing a second kitchen, because you could, on one of the larger units, actually have a rental studio suite at the lower level. So there's a variety of different potential possibilities that can evolve from it. So I'm not going to get into it any further. I have a handout for you if you're interested, which is an article I was asked to write an essay about for Vertical Urbanism magazine last April. And that I was invited to do that for them after the editor had read my book. And so there's a lot of what's in my book in this magazine, and I think I have enough for everybody. So I have a copy of the essay for you if you're interested. And you can learn about, I don't recommend you buy my book, it's far too expensive. But there's a lot of information. I hope my publisher's not here. But you can look at my website and get a lot more information than what I've been able to pack into this today. But I think that I just had a closing remark that to summarize where I'm coming from. I think we need to push aggressively, frankly, to refine the bylaw requirements and to incorporate community respect and design quality as part of the mix. That is not what is going on right now. What is going on right now is a series of checking the boxes to make sure your setbacks are adequate and that you meet all of those basic planning criteria. And that I would love to ask our city fathers and our legislators to understand and be conscious of legitimate neighborhood concerns. And that's not NIMBY, by the way. It's not NIMBY. Most people spend decades paying off their housing debt. They love their neighborhoods and they want to stay. They don't want to feel like they're being forced out. And so it's not that hard to listen. And I think one of the points that Kevin brought up about having the ability for discourse with a group like this today is maybe the beginning of something good. Engaging with your community league people, and making sure that those forces are brought to bear when it comes to making impersonal policy decisions around which there is very little public input. So I'm going to be speaking about this in a lot more detail because I'll have more time during Edmonton Design Week, so I'll throw a pitch in for that. Thank you.